Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. I want to take a little bit of time to break down the President's State of the Union speech last night. And I'm going to play some conservative reactions. I'm going to give you my own take and kind of weave that into what we do here. But I'm pretty much going to let the left break down the State of the Union speech for you. If you listen to and read what the left has to say about the State of the Union speech, that's all that you need to know. In fact, the striking thing about the State of the Union speech is that left-wingers were more critical, more harshly critical of President Obama's State of the Union speech than you and I are. Now, here is Ron Fournier. I'm just going to pick this off the top here. Then we're going to go to some sound bites. But this is Ron Fournier, who is hardcore leftist. He's a left-wing journalist, writes for the National Journal, which is a left-wing political site. And here is the title of his column on the State of the Union speech: Good Speech, Modest Agenda, Diminished Leader. This is from one of his fanboys. This is from a charter member of the Barack Obama fan club. Here's how his piece begins. Is that all there is? Now catch this first line, because remember, this is a fanboy speaking. This is a charter member of the Barack Obama fan club. Been hacking and flacking for this guy since 2007. Now it's 2014. He's had 5 years in office. Here's what Ron Fournier says in what may be his last best chance to revive a presidency that has fallen far short of its promise. Barack Obama unveiled his 2014 agenda Tuesday night: small bore executive orders, studies, summits, and legislation long seasoned and stalled. He focused on the era's seminal issue, loss of social mobility and income equality in a post-industrial economy. The cold, hard fact is too many Americans working more just to get by. Another cold, hard fact, Fournier says, Obama may not have the skill, the will, or the time to do much about it. It was a good speech about a modest agenda delivered by a diminished leader. And then he made this contrast. I hadn't thought about this till I read this piece from this uber left-winger. The night he sealed the Democratic nomination in 2008, remember what President Obama said? We've played that soundbite frequently here. This was the moment, he said, when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal. Well, that's not what he said last night. He said, and this is what Fournier says, Tuesday night was no such moment. Instead, it was a moment in miniature. So a good speech, but a modest agenda, a diminished leader. And you think about the language he uses here. I'm going to kind of parse this like I do a passage of Scripture. Not that Ron Fournier is writing Scripture here, but he's a good writer. He's a thoughtful writer. So he's choosing his vocabulary just as intentionally as writers of Scripture did. And he said, look, this was his last chance. This is his last chance. Last night was the last chance to revive a presidency. So his presidency is dead. You don't need to revive something that is vibrant, alive, energetic, moving places. You revive something that's inert, that's comatose, that's lying on a stretcher. You take the paddles to it and you kind of shock it back to life. So Ron Fournier is saying, look, this guy is 5 years into his presidency. He's got 3 years to go, and his presidency is dead in the water. He needs to be defibrillated. This presidency needs to be defibrillated, and this was his last chance to do it. You know, they got that saying in sports, they operate over till the fat lady sings. And what Ron Fournier said, man, the fat lady's in the green room. She's in there. She is warming up. She's loosening up the pipe. She is getting ready to sing. So, you know, it's a presidency that has fallen far short of its promise, he says, and President Obama may not have the skill or the will or the time to do much about it. He may not be up to it. You know, this is Ron Fournier. He doesn't have the goods to do this. He doesn't have the skill. He's too inept. He doesn't have whatever it takes to pull this agenda off. He doesn't have the skill. He doesn't have the will. You know, Ron Fournier saying, look, he just may not want it. He really may not be interested in pursuing and carrying out the duties of the office. I was talking with Tim Wildman, our president, this morning about this, and you know, we were trying to figure out if President Obama even really wants to be president. Because he's never managed anything in his life. He's never exercised executive power. He's never tried to direct anything. His whole life has been devoted to the task of causing trouble, of creating agitation, of stirring things up, of stirring up resentment and animosity against the rich or the white or whoever. That's been his whole career. That's how he's made his bones as a community organizer, more accurately referred to as a community agitator. And he has absolutely no skill at managing, directing, executing anything. So even if he did have some kind of clear agenda for the next 3 years, he would have no idea how to go about implementing it. I was telling Tim about a man who was the governor of Idaho a number of years ago, and he was a really nice guy. I knew him just a little bit, and he was an okay governor. But I developed a conviction about that guy that his ambition in life was not to be the governor of Idaho. It was to have been the governor of Idaho. He didn't actually want to be governor. He just wanted to have been the governor. He wasn't interested in managing, directing the affairs of the state. He just wanted to have that on his resume. And it's almost like that with Barack Obama. So when you've got a hardcore left-winger like Ron Fournier saying, man, this was his last best chance, his presidency is dead, this was the last chance to revive it, and he didn't pull it off. I mean, that's Fournier's deal. This was a diminished leader, got no pop, and we got 3 years left. The only, I tweeted out last night, the only good thing about last night's speech is that we've only got 2 more of these to go. But Ron Fournier says, man, it's over. This thing is over. This guy's got no pop. He's got no juice. He's got no energy. He's got no power. Now, let's grab a couple of sound bites to give you an idea. Again, we'll let the left wing, we'll let Ron Fournier lead off with the evaluation of President Obama's State of the Union speech. Here is West Virginia Senate candidate Natalie Tennant. She's a Democrat. This is Newsmax.com. These are Democrats speaking now. She slammed Obama's comments about energy in the speech. The Democratic Secretary of State is the underdog in a race against GOP nominee Reverend Shelley Moore Capito. So she's running against President Obama. She's a Democrat in West Virginia running against her own president, running against the sitting president of her party, criticizing the president, the leader of her own party, and his energy policy. And, of course, West Virginia, very heavily dependent on coal, and President Obama has made it his mission in life to put the coal industry out of business, even though it's a very cheap, inexpensive, accessible, and virtually inexhaustible supply of energy. We've got coal deposits that'll last us for 250 years. And it's accessible. It's easy to get to. The technology to burn the coal efficiently, all of that is improving. But President Obama has set the standard so high for carbon emissions on these coal-fired plants that the technology does not exist to meet those standards. So, President Obama, his people are saying, hey, no, we're not putting the coal fired plants out of business. We're not doing that. We're just raising the emission standards. Well, they've raised the emission standards to a level where the technology to be able to meet those standards does not exist. It is simply technologically impossible to meet the emission standards that the EPA has imposed on coal-fired plants. So what are they going to do? They have no choice. They're going to shut down. And I mentioned yesterday, the people up in North Dakota, their entire power grid could get knocked out by what President Obama is doing to the coal industry. Does President Obama care? No, he doesn't care. He doesn't care that people in North Dakota could wind up freezing to death because of his policies. So Tennant just all over President Obama. Here's Montana Senate candidate John Walsh. He's a Democrat. He challenged Obama on the NSA's surveillance programs. He says, I don't want the president spying on people. The president must do more to protect law-abiding citizens and end the NSA's surveillance program. So those are 2 Democrats now all over Barack Obama. Jeff, let's grab soundbite number A6. This is Mark Begich, who is running for election in Alaska. He's on with Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper, after the State of the Union speech, is asking Mark Begich about whether Obama is going to come up and campaign for him. Here's how it goes.
Well, first I'll tell you, when I ran and won was the same year he ran for his first election for the presidency. He lost Alaska by 22 points. I still won my election. If he wants to come up, I'm not really interested in campaigning. What I'd like him to do is see why his policies are wrong on ANWR, for example. He opposes oil and gas development. I'd like to show him why it's the right move to move that forward, create jobs in oil and gas. He talked about energy a little bit tonight. Well, we have it right there, a storehouse of energy. I'd like to be able to show him some of the issues that we've battled with the federal government on and try to get his policies changed that directly affect us.
So, and he says, look, if Obama comes up here, I want to take him around and show him where he's wrong. I want to show him what policies he needs to change. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I want to do if Obama comes up here to Alaska. I'm actually not interested in him campaigning for me. I don't want him campaigning for me. He lost Alaska by 22 points. His energy policies are completely wrong for the state of Alaska. Now let's go to clip number 2. This is John King, CNN, and he's giving his take on the State of the Union speech, and he too is talking about the Democrat response to the State of the Union speech.
I think what was telling after was how quickly Democrats were rushing, vulnerable Senate Democrats rushing to criticize the president. In the old days, you just didn't do an interview, or you get muted criticism. But you had Mark Begich of Alaska, you had Mark Udall of Utah, you had a senator who's not on the ballot but who has a race in his state, of West Virginia, saying the president was overstepping on executive actions. Mark Begich went as far here on CNN as saying, I don't want the president to campaign for me. I want him to come to Alaska so I can tell him how wrong he is.
So that's John King. And we'll play the Mark Udall clip. Rob, get clip number 7 ready to roll after the break. We'll play the Mark Udall clip. Now, Mark Begich, he's up there in Alaska. He says, I don't want President Obama anywhere near me. His energy policies are all wrong. We've got ANWR. We've got this untapped source of energy. And yet you heard President Obama in the State of the Union speech talking about how much more energy we are extracting from the ground. And Mark Begich says, no, that's not true. He's lying to the American people. This is a Democrat saying he opposes oil and gas development. And that's exactly right. Leases and production on federal lands are down 11 to 14%. Production on private lands and state lands is up like 28 to 30%. That's where the growth in energy production is coming from. It's coming from sectors of the economy that President Obama cannot shut down. Private land and state land, that's where it's growing. He's doing everything in his power to limit the production of oil and energy. And here's a member of his own party calling him out on it. Focal Point, AFR Talk. Be back in 2. Stay with us.